It's time to turn your daydream into your dream job. Wix gives you the power to turn your passion into a moneymaker with a website that fits your unique vision and drives you towards your goals. Let your ideas flow with AI tools that guide you, but give you full control and flexibility. Manage your business from one dashboard and keep it growing with built-in marketing features. Get everything you need to turn your part-time passion into a full-time business. Go to Wix.com.
Hello, Directioners. I'm Lauren Shippen, professional writer who is not a Larry truther, but believes in their beliefs, if you know what I mean.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm Cher McAnelly, professional Tumblr user and forever 1D fan.
Oh, okay. Can't wait to hear more about that. Yeah. This is Dashboard Diaries, a podcast for you, the folks who are in this internet bunker with us. We talk about what's going on our favorite health site, get into what we like to call Tumblr lore, do fandom deep dives, and share the times when we've gone feral over a new ship. And before we dive in today, a little bit of an announcement about the future of the show. So we have been doing this show now for almost 2 years, which is wild. And we are about to hit our 50th episode, which is even wilder. And it has been such a fun, amazing ride. And we've seen Goncharov, we've seen you end your long and glorious tenure at Tumblr, which is a huge milestone. And, we both have a lot going on in our creative lives and our professional lives. And so we've decided to put the show on a little bit of a pause after our 50th episode for an indefinite amount of time, with the hopes of sort of jumping back in when there's something really, really happening on Tumblr that we just have to talk about, but not doing it on a regular cadence anymore. And I will sort of own to this being largely driven by the fact that I just don't have time to edit this show every month anymore. But hopefully, someday we'll get back to it on a more regular cadence.
Which I feel like, announcing this during the episode about One Direction, who took a similarly, famous hiatus to the hiatus that this podcast is taking it's really well aligned. And
you know what? That's so true.
One Direction, we look forward to reuniting ever so often when the time is right, when, the Tumblr universe stars align.
Exactly. It's like we're here when you call.
Yes.
And when, the next Goncharov happens, the next, big fandom meltdown, we are going to be there and be in your feeds. But after our 50th episode, we will be going quiet for a little while. So thank you, everybody who's been listening for these last 2 years. We've had so much fun, and this show definitely isn't over. It's just, I love the One Direction hiatus.
Yeah. And it's been so much fun, talking about Tumblr, diving in with you, Lauren, and just kind of exploring this weird and wonderful website that we all love so much. And, the Dashboard Diaries Tumblr is still going to be active. We'll still be
Absolutely.
reblogging things when, things feel right or relevant. And our Ask Box will still be open as well. I believe, Lauren.
Absolutely.
In case there are any ever, so if this is not goodbye, it's just, see you on the internet and see you later. See you in a bit.
Yeah. See you in a bit. See you in a bit. We'll talk about this next week, I think. But hopefully season 911 we'll have to do a sort of an emergency shipping episode.
Oh,
that's next week's episode. We're gonna do a 911 extravaganza next next month for our 50th. I believe was the plan. If that still works for you, Cher.
Absolutely, it does. I mean, I think we
much to discuss.
It's an emergency call. Yes.
Yes, exactly. But for now, I think we just dive right into our main topic of another world famous group of people like us, like this world famous podcast who.
Yes.
Experienced a lot of discourse and drama and then took an indefinite break. Today, we are talking about probably one of the most prolific fandoms and prolific shipping fandoms of all time, which is One Direction and Larry. Cher, tell me everything that you think and feel, and your history with One Direction as a band, and your history with Larry as sort of a concept. Like, what was the first? Bring me back about 10 years.
Well, I'm excited to take you on this journey, Lauren and listeners. One Direction. My relationship with One Direction started right around when One Direction started. I am an OG One Directioner from What Makes You Beautiful.
That's huge.
And, just really, as I was preparing for this episode, I was obviously listening to some One Direction classics. Really brought me back to that time. The peak of my One Direction fandom, I would say, was when I studied abroad in Ireland around August, the fall of 2013, which happens to coincide, based on Google Trends, which I also did some research on for this episode.
Excellent.
With the peak of Larry fandom and discourse. Those are two completely separate facts and things, but Larry discourse on the internet peaked in August 2013, which is when I, Cher, landed in Ireland to spend 3 months studying abroad. And I will say the One Direction fandom was all-encompassing, kind of overwhelming in Ireland at the time. And just, I think universally at the time. I did attend a One Direction themed party during my time there, which how could you not when you went to, Tesco, if you wanted to buy paper plates, often the easiest ones to access did have One Direction.
Wait, really? They were selling One Direction like party stuff at Tesco?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Paper plates with, each person's face on them, napkins, cups, all of it. So obviously
good.
We did purchase those and often use those for just our nice, when we were entertaining.
Your fine china.
When we had our fine china. Thank you.
Yeah,
yes. When,
of course.
When we really wanted to impress, there was only one direction to go, and it was the One Direction Tesco paper plate and cutlery line.
That's so good.
I would say that's my history with One Direction. From a Larry perspective, I was never really actually shockingly on, even though I was on Tumblr at the time, I wasn't on the fandom side of Tumblr. And I somehow missed Larry until I got to Tumblr as an employee. When I started working there in 2014, I immediately, just by virtue of working at the platform, ended up on the fandom side of Tumblr and was very intimately familiar with Larry and shipping because, that it was, I almost want to say the impact of Larry on the internet culture of the early 2010s cannot be overstated, especially when it comes to shipping culture and fan culture and stan culture. It really was kind of overwhelming, all-encompassing, shockingly investigative. What's your relationship, Lauren, with One Direction and Larry as a
concept? Yeah. So, well, I guess first I should have said, anybody who's listening to this podcast is on Tumblr, so you probably know what Larry is. I'm going to assume, at the bare minimum, you know what One Direction is. But for those who maybe don't know, perhaps my mom is probably listening to this. Larry,
and this could also. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, please.
I was going to say, if there was one podcast that perhaps we should send into orbit just to educate.
Aliens, absolutely.
The aliens, anyone who might be floating out there in the universe, just kind of what's going on down here. I feel like Larry, this is it. This is
an important text. Yes, absolutely. So Larry is the ship name for Louis Tomlinson and Harry Styles, two members of the band One Direction, which was a boy band that was incredibly popular, despite its ultimately pretty short lifespan. It didn't actually, it didn't sort of last for that long, really. Mm-hmm. I do remember when One Direction kind of came onto the scene. I want to say it was 2011 probably.
2010, yeah.
2010. I remember That's What Makes You Beautiful. But I'll be honest, to this day, I have probably 12 One Direction songs on my Apple Music that I purchased because I was purchasing stuff on iTunes until I switched to Apple Music subscription until about 2 years ago. So all of the music that I have from sort of pre 2021 is all purchased. And I really like those songs, but I was never deep in the One Direction fandom or even really necessarily their music, but I was aware of how big they were. And I think I was kind of aware of some sort of amorphous shipping that was taking place within the fandom, because 2010 through 2014, 15, sort of the height of One Direction was also the height of the Sherlock fandom. And there was, I think, like a lot of sort of shared, I think there were lots of people who overlapped in the fandoms. There was a lot of shared conspiratorial thinking that, we might get to a little bit later around both of those fandoms. And so I think I sort of was like absorbing some of the ship discourse of Larry just like through osmosis of being on Tumblr active in the Sherlock fandom.
Yeah.
But I was not sort of deeply aware of it until, and I haven't been able to find the original email. I do have it somewhere. But so in many ways, Larry somewhat changed the trajectory of my life. Let me explain.
Wow. I cannot wait to hear where this is going.
So this is a story about sort of, I think, the power of like just fandom in life. So when I moved out to Los Angeles. I graduated college, moved out in June of 2013. And in the city, I knew exactly two people. My cousin Christian, who lived there at the time, and my sister's best friend from high school, Caroline Frampke. Now, Caroline Frampke, if you're like really into TV criticism and stuff, is probably a name that you might recognize. She wrote for AV Club, Vox, and then Variety as a TV and film critic. And so she's like, and I've known her since I was 12 or 13, and she introduced me to like a bunch of the TV that I love. And so Caroline is a dear, dear friend, and like had a huge influence on me in terms of like the media that I like grew up watching and enjoyed and all of that kind of stuff. And so we're very aligned in that way. And she was living in LA, and she invited me. She was really great about sort of like being, like my older sister stand-in when I moved to LA, and invited me to a party at her friend's house. And so I go to this party. This is sometime in 2014. And I end up talking to this girl. Like I'm a very, very socially anxious person. And my social anxiety was particularly bad at this time of my life because in my early 20s, I was living in a city where I didn't know anybody and I wasn't on medication yet. So parties were like
perfect storm.
Perfect storm. Parties were a real clusterfuck for me. And, like if you find somebody at a party where conversation is like somewhat easy, you just like, you got to stick with them. Right. Mm-hmm. And so like, I sort of end up in conversation with this woman my age, who I just start talking about like fantasy novels and stuff. And I just have like having a really, really good time talking to her. And we end up sort of standing in the corner and just like, talking about fantasy novels for like the whole party. And then like, 2 months later or whatever, she's like, let's grab drinks. And, we're sort of like in that like early friend stage and whatnot. And it was really nice because I found somebody who like could talk about the nerdy stuff that I enjoyed. And I hadn't really had that a lot before in my life. And little did I know sort of how deeply that went, because also at this time, I did not tell anybody that I read fan fiction or that I was like deep in sort of like shipping culture, because this was 2014. It was not mainstream. Mm-hmm. Like it was not a cool thing to be reading fan fiction all the time. And this woman was the first person I ever spoke to about fan fiction. And we got drinks at this bar near my house, and we this is like our sort of first like friend hangout or whatever, and she sort of broaches the subject of fan fiction, and we end up, and then all of a sudden it's just like we're both like, oh my god, you're a person who's not going to think I'm a freak, you're a person who's not going to think I'm a freak. And we start talking about this, and I just remember being like oh my god, I've unlocked like a new type of friendship. Mm-hmm. And this all relates to Larry, I swear, because during those drinks she tells me, like, I'm telling her all about Sherlock, right? Because like I'm like deep into the Sherlock fandom at this time, and like that's like I'm reading so much Sherlock fan fiction, and I'm like, what's your drug of choice, basically. And she starts telling me about Larry, and I then spend the next like 45 minutes just like peppering her with questions about Larry, because she's so good at explaining it and sort of explaining like the sort of mystery around it that I get totally hooked. And then, bless her heart, I love her forever for this, she sends me this like incredibly lengthy email after we get drinks of like it was basically like a fan wiki of like the history of Larry, with links to like videos, like incriminating videos that like are, sort of like, ooh, like, are they kind of like, like holding hands back there? Like all of this stuff. And I went down such a rabbit hole. And it like Larry was really the thing that like bonded us, because I think it was like, for me, it was like the first time that I talked to somebody about shipping in that kind of way. And I imagine for her, it was like, it's always fun when you get to like bring someone in on like the thing that you're really into, right?
Yeah.
And so the reason that this changed my life is that Karen ended up adding me to a Facebook group that was a private Facebook group of people who worked in entertainment who were also in fandom. And that Facebook group is like where I met like all of my best friends in LA and people that like I now work with. And like one of my best friends who I ended up introducing to another friend of mine who she is now married to. Like it truly like broke open my world forever. And it was all because like Karen was willing to tell me about Larry. And so that's like, so I feel like I have like a really, really soft spot for Larry, despite the fact that like I'm not actually in that fandom.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was such a long-winded story.
No, this was a fantastic story. I was completely gripped the entire time. Also, I love that One Direction changed your life's direction. I think that's really beautiful.
It is really beautiful.
And I also, I have so many follow-up questions, but my first one is, you said that that email that she sent, that you said you're still searching for, but you can give us a kind of TLDR on can you give us kind of the Larry origin story? Like, do you like kind of, what are some key moments? Where did this start? Because I'm vaguely familiar, but and I know like a couple, I don't know, moments in the timeline, but I would love to hear it from your perspective and kind of from the deep, like intense fandom perspective of your friend.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to run you through. I really like. I know that this email exists somewhere, and like obviously, like if I do find it, it's not like I can post it anywhere or anything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was. Oh God, it was such a great time. So yeah, she really walked me through like. She sort of wrote out like a timeline of like everything, right? So it's like One Direction was formed from the XFactor. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So it's formed the XFactor, which is a reality show. And
Simon Cowell was like the catalyst for One Direction.
That's right. And they all like lived in a house together. Mm-hmm. I want to say, yeah.
I think they, auditioned individually for the X Factor, and then Simon thought they would make a great boy band. Let's put them in this house together, see how it works.
Yes.
The rest is history.
Yes. And they did these like vlogs from the house. And so like you kind of get to see like early Harry and Louis, who are like, like Harry's like 16 and Louis is like 18 maybe. Mm-hmm. Like they're really young. And the two of them just like click, right? Like it's just like just like visible that like out of the five of them, like these two are just like really like, clicking with each other. And then I mean, like, God, there's so many intricacies. And like I for me, like the like big highlight, the sort of moment in like reading this email and then clicking away to all these YouTube links of like all of these videos was this one interview that they did like years later, where it's like the five of them in like some sort of like green room or something. They're just kind of like piled onto a couch, and like there really is like a moment where it looks like Harry, I can't remember. I think Harry is like standing behind the couch that Louis is on, or maybe it's the reverse. But like one of them sort of like leaning forward, and like it sort of looks like he's like stroking the other guy's arm, and like a very like kind of affectionate way, like you would do with your partner if you were just sort of like casually sitting on a couch, right? I just remember seeing that and being like, okay, maybe there's something here. Mm-hmm. But basically, like if you were to sort of summarize like what the Larry shipping is, or like the Larry conspiracy is, like what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about Larry, beyond just like this is a ship of these two people?
The first thing that comes to mind, I think, is the tweet in 2012. So there's two. There was one where Louis did an April Fool's tweet where he said, can't believe I'm going to be a dad. And then the X Factor tweeted, we can confirm that Harry Styles is pregnant. It's a girl. If it's a girl, he's calling it. And if it's a boy, Juan Direction Styles, hashtag Harry's pregnant. And so obviously these happened on the same day within an hour of each other.
Oh my God.
I mean, which just brings me to this, this being how I discovered what mpreg was. Which for those listeners who don't know what mpreg is and haven't, perhaps deduced from the context clues so far, mpreg is a section of fandom, or like a subsect of fandom that is focused on male pregnancy. And it was I would say a big part or sect of the following this tweet, the kind of Louis Harry
that
fandom.
Explains so much, honestly.
Yeah.
Also, that is far and away, and like not to yuck anybody's name, like you do you, but that is far and away my most filtered out tag on AO3 is mpreg. Like I just like anytime I'm searching for anything, I just filter that out, because I'm gonna be honest, I don't like pregnancy with women either. Like I just don't want to read about it.
I agree. I very much it's something that, again, to each their own.
To each their own. No shade whatsoever.
Pregnancy in general, when it's in, plot lines in shows or in fanfic or whatever it is, I tend to just filter it out. It's not what I'm coming to whatever, pop culture thing for.
Agree.
I am happy if it makes you happy.
And there's plenty out there for you if it does make you happy. Mm-hmm. Truly.
Like, I also found out about Vor around a similar time. Not to do with Larry, but...
I love this because same on both counts. So actually, the first, after my Larry friend added me to this fandom group on Facebook, we started sort of doing in-person events where we would hang out and we would sort of do fanish things. And I think I've maybe talked about this party before, but I hosted a Galentine's Day party at my apartment. Which is where I first sort of met a lot of these people that I ended up becoming really close with, and I printed out all of these Tumblr Valentines and put them all over my apartment, and it was really, really fun. But we played fan fiction Never Have I Ever, which, let me tell you, a great game to play.
Incredible.
Of just basically never have I ever read mpreg, right? Never have I ever written such and such, right? And then you just play it never have I ever, and it was that party, which would not have happened without this Larry friend of mine, where I learned about mpreg, vor, and oviposition, the egg laying thing.
Oh my gosh.
I learned so much that night.
The mind expanding meme is just
really. So I love that in a roundabout way, Larry brought us these wonderful pieces of knowledge.
the Larry to niche fetish fandom subsect pipeline.
Yes, yeah.
And I also found this other the mpreg tweet, or not the mpreg, essentially the One Direction mpreg tweet was shockingly not though it was, I would say, a major fandom catalyst. It wasn't the biggest tweet ever. The One Direction tweet that became the second biggest tweet at the time was Louis tweeting "Always in my heart" at Harry Styles, yours sincerely, Louis, on October the 2nd, 2011. I think October the 2nd, 2011. I don't know who screenshotted this, because if they were in the UK, it could have been February 10th, 2011.
Oh,
so
sure.
If anyone has the accurate, one of those two dates.
One of those two. It was 2011.
One of those. And it beat out Obama's 4 more years tweet in terms of engagement.
So good. Oh my God. That's amazing.
Which, again, just Larry's impact cannot be overstated.
No, truly. Also the Obama implications,
Oh, the whole, do we
go
even,
to our
do we
Obama
even
episode.
go there? Yeah, go listen to our Obama
I can't believe we did an Obama episode before we did a Larry episode.
That is, wow.
Go hyper specific before going broad,
Which I also am just kind of having, again, a bit of a shock moment. The fact that that Larry tweet beat out the Obama tweet, and then the Larry Louis Obama love triangle. What?
Wild stuff.
Wild stuff. Truly. when Mr. Internet created the internet, or Mrs. Internet, when the internet person created the internet, this is going so well. Could they have ever predicted that this is where we would end up?
Well, so there are two wonderful books that sort of relate to this. One of them more directly than the other, that I think anybody who's listening to this episode who like finds this kind of stuff fascinating should read. The first is written by actually former Dashboard Diaries guest Gretchen McCulloch, Because Internet, her book on internet language and sort of how the internet evolved is wonderful. And I think is like a perfect prequel to Everything I Need, I Get From You by Caitlin Tiffany, which is a book about the One Direction fandom that is excellent. And it kind of talks about like One Direction's fandom like impact on the internet, like as an infrastructure. Like the One Direction and specifically the Larry Shipping fandom had like real impact on the way that like certain social media sites worked, like just the way that the internet functioned. Like to your point, like it in many ways, I think created modern stan culture. And yeah, it's a really, that's Everything I Need, I Get From You by Caitlin Tiffany. I really recommend reading it. It is a fascinating read.
And the implications of Larry shippers or Larry shipping and modern stan culture on, One Direction as a band. I even like the members of One Direction have never said that Larry shipping had anything to do with the band's hiatus. However, both Louis more than Harry, I believe, but Louis has explicitly said multiple times, as have other members of the band, that Larry shipping affected their day-to-day interactions, affected how Louis and Harry interacted with each other, affected their friendship, added distance in their friendship because every interaction was broken down, to the most intense scrutiny. And I even as recently as 2024, as I was doing research for this episode, I found a post from a couple months ago that detailed every single Harry and Louis interaction and potential hint wearing a shirt that might have said XYZ that was a hint to something in 2024.
Wow.
Which I'm not going to reblog to Dashboard Diaries, but I did save, and I'll drop in just to I just love the context. For the context, it was quite shocking. The depth and time and research and energy that went into this. And so I think it's important to discuss, and we have discussed in the past, I'm pretty sure during the Obama episode, the implications of real life shipping versus fictional character shipping, because it is such a big thing. Even I was, checking out the fandom list and looking at engagement, and there's consistent real life shipping, outside of course, Larry Obama. It's a normal, but I just think there's before I go on too much of a stream of consciousness tangent here, what are your thoughts, Lauren, on real life shipping? Though I know that you've shared them in previous episodes, and also where do you think that line is between, being a dedicated fan who's having some fun and, perhaps, where's that line crossed to, invasion of privacy of real people's lives?
Yeah. Well, all of that is so well put. And I think that there is a very, very stark line. I don't know that it's always clear, right? And actually, I should say that the reason that I was sort of led to that Caitlin Tiffany book is not because I was looking for books on fandom or on Tumblr or on internet culture. It's because Caitlin Tiffany is one of my favorite journalists who writes about conspiracy theories. The Atlantic did this huge conspiracy theory series called Shadowlands a couple of years back. And, I have my varying opinions about the Atlantic. But this particular series I thought was really, really well done. And Caitlin Tiffany wrote a bunch for that. And this book, I read a lot about conspiracy thinking. It's and sort of extremism on the internet. It's like a sort of interest of mine, and that's why I picked up this book, actually, is because it's in many ways a book about conspiratorial thinking. And there's some really interesting parallels, actually, that not necessarily she directly draws, but I've read also a lot of books about QAnon. And in terms of how people get into the very, very extreme stan culture conspiracy thinking and how people get into something like QAnon, it's the exact same. It's the exact same pipeline. And
wow. Yes.
Yeah. And it's really, really interesting. And so I do think that like, okay, here, I'll say this, you know, RPF, like real person fiction or real person shipping is like not my personal thing. Like I've never really been into a real person ship, but I do have a lot of friends who are, and I think that when it comes to like writing fan fiction about it, or you know, what my friend did with me, which is like, I'm going to tell you everything and I'm going to sort of like show you all of this evidence and like we're going to kind of like have fun with it and stuff. I think that's fine. Like, I think that falls into like people just like doing whatever they want on the internet and with their friends in a way that is like not toxic and not really like affecting anybody.
Yeah, I think just having fun with the fandom.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just having fun. And I think that like in the same way that like, you know, if you were gonna to like go really, really deep in on like Bigfoot with a friend or whatever, it's like, you know, as long as like you're not tipping over into like really starting to be sort of paranoid about the infrastructure around it, because this is like sort of the core of the Larry shipping conspiracy, which is that their management was preventing them from sort of being a public couple and from sort of being queer publicly. And look, we know that like this is something that kind of happens. Like, you know, who was it? Lance Bass came out, you know, in recent years and said that like one of the reasons that he didn't come out for so long is because not the management was pressuring him, but that he felt pressured by the culture of boy bands and by the culture of being a very public figure to not come out. And that, you know, there have been lots of other like actors and things like that who have sort of been forced out of the closet or have been, you know, who have had rumors flying around about them. And it's like, yeah, it can change, especially 10 years ago. It could really have a material effect on your career. And so like, I don't think that it's crazy to think that somebody is in the closet because of the fear of homophobia affecting their career.
Definitely not.
I think that's very valid. And I think that that's something that we know has happened. I do think that, you know, when it started to sort of tip over into like management is keeping them silent and like, you know, management is preventing them from doing this, that is a type of conspiratorial thinking that to me starts to like, that's like a big red flag, right? Yeah. It's like if it's like someone, there is a concerted effort from a group of people to keep a secret is almost always going to lead you down a conspiracy path that is toxic, because it's incredibly hard to keep secrets and it's incredibly hard to keep secrets for a long time with any number of people larger than two, right? Could I believe that Harry and Louis were having an affair and were keeping it secret, you know, the best that they could because they didn't want it to get out and have an effect on their career? Sure. Yeah. I don't think that that's crazy. Right. I think that there have been some real life examples of this. Right. Like one of my favorites is Matthew Rhys and Kerry Russell on The Americans. Do you know about this?
I am not super familiar with the lore. No.
Okay. So this is the closest that I get to real person shipping. Because The Americans is a wonderful show about Russian spies in America in the 80s posing as an American family and doing spycraft for the Soviet Union, right? Which is like a real thing that happened. And Kerry Russell and Matthew Rhys play this married couple, and like they're Soviet spies who have been basically trained and paired together to pretend to be this married couple, but they really are married. But it's like, God, if you ever just want like a messy, complicated ship, like this show has everything, because it's like they're married to each other, they are sleeping together, but it's not real, except it is real. And like, it's crazy.
It's so I watched, I think, the first season of The Americans. I never finished it. I really do need to give it another go because
you've got to.
The chaos, the mess, the fact that they actually had children in their fake
marriage,
but real marriage.
But the children don't know that their parents are spies. And also, like, you know, part of her job as a Soviet spy is to basically do like like she does sex work for her job, right? She like sleeps with people to get information from them. And actually he does too. And so like they're both like having these extramarital affairs that are also lies, but there's also some real feelings tangled. It's delightful. And so the craziest thing about this is that in like season 5 of this show, Carrie Russell gets pregnant, and like in like one announcement, she's like, I'm pregnant. It's Matthew Rhys's baby. We've been together for many, many years. We're still together now. We're having a baby. It's like, and then like eventually they're like, yeah, we were sneaking off of set to go make out in the car during season 1 filming.
Which, I mean, incredible. Like, all shippers were probably losing their collective minds. The fic writes itself. I mean, it's real. Good. It's reality.
Like it really, like that really happened. And then of course, you know, Dan and Phil, right? Like they are, it's unclear if they're together now, but like they did say that they have been together at times. And like, I think when we've talked about Dan and Phil on the show, like I think that's a great example of like how all of this stuff can have an effect on two people's relationships, right? Because Dan and Phil were really affected by that, you know, per their own admission. And they also have been very, very clear that they are not saying anything about the current status of their relationship ever. And like they might be together, they might not be together, but like it's nobody's business. Sorry, I wanted I just wanted such a side quest, but like.
No, but I think it's a very
I don't know,
relevant to the
think
conversation.
The line is like, where is the line for you?
I agree with everything that you said, essentially, that the line is when it goes beyond, hey, we're having fun with friends and talking about, you know, how much fun would it be if, you know, these two were a couple and, you know, look how they looked at each other during this interview. Because who you know, hasn't done that? Who's among us hasn't, you know, shipped real people? I mean, it's such a consistent thing that it's common in, you know, press tours for TV shows and movies for characters that are shipped together to start dating as a PR relationship during the press tour, or, you know, as part of, you know, like how many of these relationships are real versus how many were PR relationships. I mean, I'm thinking about Rachel McAdams and Ryan Gosling and that kiss during was it the MTV Movie Awards?
Yeah.
No, not the Teen Choice Awards? Teen Choice Awards for Best Kiss for The Notebook.
I'm convinced, you know, Tom Hiddleston and Taylor Swift were a PR thing because he wanted to be James Bond. Like, that's a conspiracy theory I have.
You know, I would absolutely go down that rabbit hole with you and fully believe it. So I think, you know, there's so much, I agree that there is definitely a level that is all in good fun. So much of fandom is in good fun, and just because, you know, I like this band and I want to, you know, feel, you know, connected, and I just, you know, this is a fun thing to connect with other fans, but then I think when it starts to get down that paranoia, or we're being lied to, or not listening to Harry and Louis when they say, cut it out, we're not comfortable with this, we don't like this, that's when it starts to get, you know, the line is significantly before it starts to affect the lives of the people who you're talking about. I think that is
such a good way of putting it. Yeah. And I think too that like the way that I feel about real person shipping and where that line is actually very similar to the way that I feel about like shipping in general. And which is that like the moment that you bring it directly to the people involved, whether it's the showrunner of a show, the actor of the characters who you ship, or the real people that you ship, the moment you're adding them online, or you're bringing it up at a convention, or you're bringing it up in an interview, you've broken kayfabe and you've crossed the line.
Yes.
Like, it is so important to me and I mean, like, I realize that I say this as somebody who like does answer questions about ships in her stuff like on Tumblr, right? But like I do think that there's also like a sort of size of fandom that like maybe make like that, like there's some nuance within that, I think.
And it's also your choice, and, you know, the creator's choice to engage, whether or not to engage in the shipping in the fandom.
Totally. And like, you know, there are like I've always been very open about the fact of like, you know, if you ship you know, these characters who aren't in a relationship in the Bright Sessions or whatever, like, go forth and prosper. Like, you do whatever the fuck you want with my characters.
Have your headcanon.
Yeah, exactly. But I think if someone were to come to me and be like, well, when is this going to happen? Or like, why, you know, like, why didn't this ship go? It's like, there's a certain way that you can ask somebody that is like aggressive, right? And I really, really hate like actual like interviews, like whether it's press junkets or whatever else, asking about fan fiction and shipping. Like I think, again, like maybe there's a little bit of nuance. Like if you know, you're doing like oh God, I'm trying to think of you're doing a press junket for Last of Us season 2, and you know, you ask about the Ellie and Dina relationship or whatever. It's like, okay, yeah, that's a canon ship. Like, we know that that's sort of where they're headed. So it's like, fine. Yeah,
I think there's a way to ask about it and discuss it that gives the interviewee the space to go in that direction if they want to or not. You know, asking about the fandom or the discourse, or what conversations from the fandoms are you aware of, or like that you might want to talk, like that kind of thing, you know, can be fun. I remember I did an interview with a couple, the names of these guys are escaping me. I'll have to find them, but with a couple guys who are in WWE at Netflix Geek Week. And as soon as I mentioned that I was interviewing from Tumblr, they brought up the fact that they read Tumblr fan fiction in the I'm saying dressing room, but that's not in the locker room. They read Tumblr fan fiction in the locker room and read different characters, and they actually even during a wrestling match talked into the mic about Tumblr fanfic. They brought it up specifically. Awesome. And I was like, okay, I'm bringing this up in the interview because they've brought it up first, and they went all in talking about it. And so it's like, if they bring it up, you know, if the interviewee or the person brings it up first, or they're interested in going in that direction of the fandom, great. But when it's just, like brought to you with no kind of warning, and you're put on the spot, when you're put on the spot and there's no real escape, and because it really feels like when that happens, there's no right answer for the fandom. The fandom is just going to take whatever they want out of that answer. Yes. Especially if the person doesn't want to talk about it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that like, I think that, there's a sort of fuzzy space when it comes to sort of fictional stuff within that, and including wrestling as fictional stuff too, right? Like, that's where we get the word kayfabe, right? Which is like maintaining the illusion, right? But yeah, when it comes to real person stuff, it's like, I don't think that it's ever like it's just not appropriate to like ask a stranger like, hey, do you want to fuck your coworker? Like, that's just not okay. Like, that's just not a normal thing to ask a person. It's fine for you to talk to your friends about it. Like, they're a public figure. That is part of the bargain that you make. But like, you cannot ask them about it.
Yeah, especially because we don't know what's going on in these people's lives. If a lot of the time people keep their relationships private, and you know what's going on in their personal lives private, and asking this kind of question can also just like, for this person, open up a can of worms in their attempt to casually answer something without, you know, igniting like a fire in the fandom of which, you know, they're a part of.
Absolutely.
And it's also hard because you feel like then any moment of like sweet interaction between these two people becomes so much more than that. And so then they're overthinking their like photo shoot or, you know, sweet moment at the press junket, and everyone says like, oh, they're leaning into it, they're buying into it, or whatever it is. It's like, okay, or maybe they're just like friends because they've worked together and they want to talk or hang out or put their arms around each other, and like that is nothing more than exactly what it is. But now they have to think about this with every interaction, you know.
Yes.
And you know, people often say, oh, well, they agreed to be public figures, and again, I think that public figures still deserve privacy. You know, they're public for their job, not their life.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we're seeing, you know, a lot of this. I think, I mean, this is a whole other episode, but like, I think Chapel Roan is like a really interesting example of somebody who has been experiencing this particular fuzzy line in real time. And like, I have so much empathy for her because like, it's very, very hard to get famous that quickly. And like, I think some things are incredibly obviously not okay, right? Like a fan just like kissing her on the mouth without like without any, it's like that's simply just assault.
It's
like that is
literally,
just textbook assault. Like that is not okay.
No level of celebrity that would ever make it okay to invade someone's and people just like feel this ownership. It's like dehumanizing ownership over public figures. The way that we approach that like fandom culture has grown. I mean, I think Chappell Roan is such a good example of it. Is just really concerning to the point where I even like, as I've been watching what's happened with Chappell over the past year, like it's impacted even my personal industry goals. With the way that I look at my goal, again, who knows where the future will hold, but I always, I really, have always enjoyed doing like on camera things, doing like on camera interviews and being, I'm always comfortable being tagged. And like, when I grew up, I wanted to be a comedian, and I, still have a lot of, those aspirations and love working in the entertainment industry. But the way that, Chappell she worked for years. She, went from having a small but dedicated fan base where she could have that kind of one-to-one, I'm chatting with you interaction, to becoming, an international superstar overnight. And then people, they do what they do with women. They build her up, and then they just decide we're overexposed now. And I'm not saying that, she's a perfect person, but no one's a perfect person, no one's a perfect victim, and her saying perhaps some tone deaf things does not warrant the vitriol that she is getting.
Absolutely not.
And it has made me kind of take a step back and be like, if I achieve my ultimate goal, am I just setting myself up to ultimately be torn down, when I could just kind of work in a part of the industry where no one knows who I am, and I still get to work in the industry and enjoy what I'm doing, and not set myself up for this kind of potential, just vitriol that is directed towards women seemingly, without any kind of, what's the word I'm looking, like, it feels quite random. Just like, here's the woman we've decided to tear down this month.
Totally. And like, I completely agree with all of that. And this is why I have so much sympathy and empathy for her. Cause it's like, I mean, like the sort of recent thing of her, sort of being like, don't look to me for politics, after sort of previously, like being a very outspoken, person when it comes to politics. It's like, you're learning in real time that this is just a trap. That no matter what you do, it is a trap. And I just wish that she had somebody, like some PR media training person, like kind of helping her through. And if she does, that person's bad at their job. Because like, I've watched this happen like firsthand with friends of mine and acquaintances and people that I know who became famous very, very, very quickly, or entered a relationship with somebody very famous, or who got famous in a particular corner of the internet and then, had a particularly, intense fandom to contend with. And it really, there is nothing that you can do correctly. It's funny when we started to sort of talk about stan culture, like as a thing, sort of, within music and stuff, a couple years back now, it was a little bit separate from the origin of that term. And I think now, as it's grown, it's sort of circled back to be like, stan culture is that Eminem song and video, right?
Yeah.
Like, it is about sort of the like intensive fan who tries to like take over your life in some respects. And like, I think for me to bring it all full circle, the sort of the point where I was like, oh, okay, like we've gotten too far down the rabbit hole, was all of the stuff with Louis' baby. I don't know how aware you were of sort of that whole drama.
I'm not aware of the specifics of that drama. In my research for the episode, I was reading some articles and interviews, and one of the ones that Louis mentioned specifically, when he was saying when fan culture went too far, is when he said when my baby was brought into it. But I'm not familiar with the full context there.
So interestingly, the same thing happened in the Sherlock fandom. And I like, there's some larger psychological thing at play here that I can't put my finger on, but it is interesting to me that it does tend to happen. So basically, the Sherlock thing was less about Sherlock and more about Benedict Cumberbatch, but it kind of like, I remember being aware of it because of the Sherlock fandom, because a lot of people in the Sherlock fandom were also like obsessed with Benedict Cumberbatch the person, Which again, like fine, like stan an actor, like find him handsome,
Yeah.
like whatever, right? Like write fanfic of you and him, like do your own thing on your own time in your own space. Like who cares?
I once wrote fan mail to Hilary Duff with testimonials on the back from my friends about how big of a fan I was.
That is
like,
so
be a fan.
cute. That is so cute. And yeah, I love getting fan mail. Like writing fan mail about how important somebody is to you, I think is like really, really lovely. But Benedict Cumberbatch got married or partnered. I can't totally remember the timeline of things, but basically like he had a baby with this woman. And a lot of his stans were like not thrilled that he was now off the market and then had a baby. And actually Caitlin Tiffany wrote an article in the Atlantic for the Shadowland series about this exact conspiracy. There started to be a conspiracy that like the baby was not real. And this is essentially what the Louis baby conspiracy is as well, which is that I truly don't remember the details of Louis's baby, if it's that he is his wife or what, I don't remember exactly what the deal was. But he had a baby, and people were convinced that it was a very one of these like very, very lifelike dolls. Like you can get these like baby dolls that are like incredibly lifelike. And people went into the photo of him holding this like black and white photo of him holding his baby and like manipulated the photo to show that like the shadows were wrong, like he wasn't holding a real human baby and that it was photoshopped or that it was actually a doll. And like, yeah, if you are and like and I say this with like no like judgment, like maybe judgment's the wrong word, but like I don't say this to like make fun of these people or to call them crazy or anything like that, but like if you find that you are thinking this way about a particular celebrity, like I would try and step back and like talk to people in your life, because like like that's a dangerous mode of thinking and a dangerous sort of rabbit hole to start going down, and you just don't know where you're going to end up in terms of what conspiracies you're going to be sucked into. Because that to me was like, okay, we are on another planet now. Like this is something different.
And I think that's the thing. It creates an eventual break with reality that can just seep into every part of your life.
Yes.
I mean, as you mentioned with QAnon earlier, it's at this point, some people who are so deep in, the QAnon conspiracy, they're completely brainwashed. Like it is like you can't, like to the extent that they're the brainwashing, the techniques that I'm bastardizing the phrasing of this, but like the techniques used to deprogram people from brainwashing tend to not work with people who have been like pulled into the QAnon conspiracy rabbit hole.
I do think that this is one of the things I find most interesting about the Larry Shippen in particular, and like Caitlin Tiffany's book, is just like how serious it actually can be at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is it started and, is for so much of the, One Direction fandom and the Larry fandom, a lighthearted, fun thing. It's like, it's escape. It's just, engaging with the fandom that you love. But as you said, this like lighthearted, fun thing can get serious very fast. And that's where you just have to be aware of, where you're falling kind of on that spectrum. And if you find yourself like slipping into more conspiratorial thinking, I mean, as I've talked about in previous episodes, I'm a shockingly gullible person. One of my friends convinced me that, the new pope is picked from a wall of babies in heaven, which she later told me was she based off of, the Hall of Faces from Game of Thrones.
Incredible.
So, if I could believe that for my best friend, like it has honestly the realization that I am that vulnerable to falsehoods has made me double check my sources more consistently, because I so quickly fell into that.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. And I will say this is something, this particular like corner of like internet life is something that I have been like actively and consistently researching since about 2016. So it's like I have spent like almost 10 years kind of like learning everything I can about this stuff. And there are definitely still times where like I'll see something online and I'll be like, oh my God. And then I'm like, wait, okay. Like, and like I can still fall for things, even though I know the hallmark of like all of the different tactics that people use online. And obviously with AI image and video generation, like this is all getting so much worse. But I think I saw this post once on Tumblr that I think just like perfectly sums up everything that we're talking about. as it pertains to sort of like, spending time on Tumblr and being in fandom, which is that if you are deep in a fandom and you find yourself being more angry about it than not, it's probably a good time for you to step back and take some time away from that fandom. And I think that, like, to sort of expand on that idea a little bit more, like, we are people for whom art is deeply important, right? Like, we are people who have spent a lot of time on Tumblr and make art in our personal lives. And, like, in many ways, like, getting really into a piece of art is something that, like, fulfills me and brings me more joy than, like, almost anything else in my life, right? And so that's not to say that you can't have, like, a strong reaction to a piece of art, or that you can't get angry or frustrated about the way that a story is going or the choice that somebody made or something like that. But, like, if you find that most of your sort of Tumblr interactions with your fandom are complaining about the show or talking about how, like, they've fucked it up in this kind of way, that kind of way, or, like, actually things are going to be okay because of these 700 different reasons, that you've picked out sort of in a particular episode or whatever, like, and it's not bringing you kind of that lighthearted joy at all anymore, like, just take a break. Like, you don't need to, like, abandon the fandom completely, but just, like, take a break, because, like, it's just, like, I've had this experience with fandoms too, where, like, something happens and I get really, really upset about it. And it's like, you just have to step away for a while. And, like, maybe you can come back to it and have a healthy relationship with it. Maybe you can't.
I mean, look at the end of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
That was, like, a global phenomenon where an entire fandom was just
furious,
incensed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's true. And, like, and if that, like, sometimes that can ruin the thing forever for you, but sometimes you can take a step away and you can come back to it and still find some joy in the thing that you loved about it in the first place. So I think just taking that time is important.
And I also think it's, a lot of the time when that line gets crossed from this fandom makes me happy and I'm having fun engaging with it to, like, this fandom makes me mad, is then you start to actually hurt the thing that you love as well. Like Star Wars, I think, is a really great example of this. And how many cast members from Star Wars have been bullied off of the internet?
Yes, it's crazy.
Just because they don't like the character for some reason. And, like, I mean, I think there's often a lot more to discuss there.
Right.
And it's often racist and sexist
yes.
As well. So there's just a lot, we could do dozens of episodes about this. But it is so interesting that it's kind of like this, like, fandom ends up being the snake that eats itself.
Yes. There's actually, like, a great tweet that basically goes, like, stages of a fandom. I love this. I own this. I control this. I can't control this. I hate this. I must destroy this. And, like, yes. I think that is how it goes. And I think, like, you're hurting the thing that you love, I think, is such a good way of putting it. Because, like, not only are you potentially having a material effect on what companies are spending their money making and the people that they are hiring, but also you're hurting the fandom space. And, like, if enough fans are sort of, like, feeding into that toxic snake eating its own tail, then the fandom suffers. Whereas if you don't let that happen, then you have things like the Hannibal fandom or the Merlin fandoms that, like, are still around and thriving. And I'm sure that there's toxic discourse within those fandoms, but that for the most part, everybody's still having a good time. And those things ended.
The House fandom?
Yeah, the House fandom. Those things ended ages ago. And it's like, but the fandom has survived versus, like, Sherlock. Like, there's not, like the fandom isn't really there anymore in the same way because it kind of ate its own tail.
Yeah, and watching The Last of Us and engaging and kind of following along with The Last of Us fandom as well is, I think, a very similar situation and conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah.
And, the harm that people do to the actors that are bringing to life the thing that they love.
Yeah, it's bonkers. I mean, Cher, we're already deep in our feels, but let's get a little bit more specific and round out with our feels corner. What has you in your feels right now?
Well, I think one of the first things that I wrote down that has me in my feels is The Last of Us.
Oh my God.
I have so many emotions about that show, where the show is going, what's happened the last few weeks. I also have been rewatching season 1 and recently rewatched episode 3?
Oh, don't even get me started.
Yeah. And so just having a lot of emotions about The Last of Us. I continue to think that it's a really beautifully done show and everyone is, putting in the performance of their lives. And Hacks also has me in my feels, especially this last week's episode. We're recording this on May 19th or not. Actually, I don't think I've seen this Thursday's episode.
It was 2 episodes.
Are you caught up?
Yeah, it was 2 episodes. So I think the season's over now because they dropped 2 last Thursday.
Oh my gosh. I haven't seen, the last episode I saw was the one with Ava and Deborah at the beach.
Okay, yeah, no, you've got some catching up to do.
Oh my gosh.
It's great.
So, yeah, I'm about to be even deeper in my feels. And then finally, I'm in my feels about the show. I've had so much fun recording it with you, Lauren, over these past 2 years, and so much fun, with all of our listeners and just, exploring Tumblr. And yeah, can't wait for our next episode. Can't wait for our special episodes, and just keep tumbling.
Keep tumbling. Keep tumbling. Oh,
yeah. What about you? What has you in your feels?
I mean, all of those things, and to call out some specific moments. Are you caught up on The Last of Us?
I am.
Okay.
Yes. Wait, there was an
episode last night.
I haven't seen last night's episode.
Okay. I cried. Last night's episode was the first episode to get me crying.
Oh my gosh.
I think this episode
really, even after episode 2.
Yeah. I mean, because I've played the game, right? And so it's I knew it was coming, and I did tear up a little bit, but there was just a couple moments in last night's episode 6, that just really got me good. And
is episode 6 the flashback episode?
Yeah.
I've fully, also feel free to kind of spoil things for me, because I have spoiled myself because of my lack of self-control and fandom research.
There's just one sequence in the game that I really loved that they just did so beautifully in the show, which is it takes place in a museum in a little space shuttle, and the way that Pedro Pascal acted that was just so beautiful. He's lying down, and just a little tear rolls into his perfect little crow's feet. And I was just oh my God, you're everything to me. And I mean, Bella Ramsey just continues to kick ass as Ellie. They're so good in that role. So yeah, that had me in my feels. And then the moment I want to call it in Hacks is from I think you've passed this episode already for sure. But Hacks is not really a show that I cry at necessarily. But this
it has its moments.
It has its moments, but it's not really a crier for me. But when Deborah was giving her monologue, and she'd been told earlier to just do it to one person, and the whole audience is fierce, and it's just Ava. I gasped.
Yeah, literally. I don't know if you can
see
my my hairs are
got goosebumps. Oh my God!
It was just so beautiful. It was such a culmination of just everything they've both been working towards, and it kind of felt like even in that moment, though they were fighting and even continued to fight after that moment, kind of everything faded away, and all that mattered was the art.
Yeah, and the love that was there.
And the love. Yeah.
And then finally, the one thing that you didn't mention that is in my feels corner is Andor. I don't know if you've been watching Andor.
I have not. I haven't. I think I watched part of season 1, but I don't. Yeah,
So,
please. Sorry, can't complete a sentence at the moment.
Everybody should watch this show, especially right now. It is. I don't care if you hate Star Wars, you need to watch this show. It is almost nothing to do with Star Wars. It's so funny. My partner and I, after the finale was this past week, and we were between this and The Pit, every other TV show sucks. It's just we've had these 2 perfect TV shows come out this year. Mm-hmm. And we rewatched all of season 1 of Andor leading up to season 2. And just it is some of the most astonishing television writing I have ever heard in my life. It is the most politically sort of salient piece of art that I've seen this year. It is just because it is about both seasons are about pushing back against authoritarianism, which obviously we are currently experiencing in this country, and or we're experiencing authoritarianism. I don't know that we're experiencing enough pushing back yet.
Yeah.
And it just there is a speech from the end of season 1 that just even if I just see a Tumblr post on it, just even thinking about it, I want to cry. It's just some of the most beautiful writing I've ever heard. So yeah, Andor really, really has me in my feels, and it's just, you gotta watch it. I'm
going to. Yeah, because Andor's one of those shows where I'm not I haven't seen all of the Star Wars, shows.
You literally
and
don't
films,
need to
so
see any
it was
Star
one
Wars.
where I was like, oh, I need to, start from the beginning. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to commit. I'm going to do it all.
Nope.
But that's where I go to, okay, so I can just
You
watch
can watch it
Andor. Because I
cold.
tried with The Mandalorian and felt so out of my element that I was like, okay, I need to do a lot of research in just watching all of these films before I can get into The Mandalorian.
No,
But it's good
Andor,
to know
if
that
you
it's
just sort of
different,
like, especially like the first 3 episodes just kind of throw you into the deep end. Like if you just sort of like let go of understanding what's going on, you will get there. And then like it has such tangential relationship to any of the other pieces of Star Wars, sort of the Star Wars franchise. Other than like, that the Empire is a thing and that Darth Vader is a thing and that the Death Star is a thing. Like that's kind of all you need to know. But even that, like that really only comes into play like in Rogue One, which is the movie that it leads up to. So it's like we watched Rogue One after season 2. So watch season 1, season 2, and then watch Rogue One because Rogue One is
which I have seen.
Yeah.
And did not like the ending of.
Yes. Well, you're going to
saw that
hate it
in
even
theaters.
more now when you learn to love Cassian Andor more than your own life.
Fantastic. Can't wait to hurt.
Oh, it hurts so good though. Okay. And with that, I'm Lauren Shippen, and you can find me at theLaurenShippen.tumblr.com.
I'm Cher McAnelly, and you can find me at overshares.tumblr.com. This has been Dashboard Diaries, and
may your nons always be loving,
your dash always refreshed,
your gifts always be loading,
and your ships always canon.
May the fix you're reading always be finished,
and the answers you seek always in the reblogs.
Thanks for scrolling with us.